Welcome back, folks. Today, this video, welcome back, everybody. Today in this video, we are going to be doing a little bit of a how-to. In this particular model, I have a cockpit with a canopy that just comes with rails, no glass, no panels. And I need to make some. I mean, you don't need to, but I want to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some UV resin and some basic tape and some simple items, and we're going to create it. Now you can use this to make windows, panels, lenses, whatever. Now normally for something, you know, if I need to make just something small, a small little window and something, I would use something like this, micro crystal clear. And to be honest, I'm not really sure that this is very much different than like Elmer's glue, but this only works for very, very small type windows. For something with a lot more surface area like this, you need a different kind of solution. And UV resin has a lot of different uses in all sorts of modeling. But for a project like this, it's going to be really useful for us in the main way that we can use the UV light to have it set and cure very, very quickly. Now, this is something that would be a little bit easier to do before this canopy was mounted into the main model, but I chose to put it on so I could do all the painting and everything first. But to do this, what we're going to use is Scotch tape. Okay, I could use packing tape or something else, but this has a much lighter adhesive, which just makes it a little easier to work with, you know, removing it later on. It's very good though because it is adhesive, obviously, and so it's going to stick to the inside of the canopy, but you can peel it off from the cured resin later. So we're going to work first with these two flat panels on the top, and all you really got to do is just get it inside there and make sure that it is providing a nice flat surface, kind of a flat background, we'll say. So you have a nice flat panel. You just want to make sure that you're adhering it to the canopy railing all around so your resin doesn't leak once you put it in. You want to be careful though that you're not pushing it up into that recess. You don't want like a bubble or a bow. You can use, I'm just going to use these little Q-tips here to make sure I'm pressing it on and not pressing the middle part. Now, one thing I will warn you is that when you're doing this, you know, depending on how thick the railing area is, and you can see that these railings are fairly thick. You know, you could end up making a very thick glass piece, and for something like this is a tabletop war game piece, and it's not the finest detailed piece to begin with, so I'm not so worried about it. If you're doing more of a scale representation of a real you know, craft, you might want to think about how you're working on it and, you know, the thickness of the window piece itself. But for right now, I'm not so worried about it. So we're going to be working with, got some tape, this panel and this panel first right there. Now, some of these UV resins can have kind of a nasty smell, so take that into account ventilation wise, you know, when you're working. You can, depending on how fine a nozzle you have and how accurate you can apply it, put it directly in. Just put a little blob there. Put one more little dot. And then I'm just going to use a toothpick. Now remember, this is UV resin. You don't have to worry about is it going to set or cure while you're working on it. Nothing like that right now. You have all the time in the world to get it exactly as you want it. Just want to make sure there's no air bubbles. And the one thing I want to do is, if you can see, it's a little bit, you know, surface tension. It's up on the sides, but there's a little bit of a depression in there. I want to make sure it sits as flush with the top, with the surface of those rails as possible right now. So I'll just add one more little dot, and now it is actually a little convex there. We don't want that. We don't want it concave. We don't want it convex. We'll use fancy words. That'll do. That'll work well. So I have a UV light that is actually my very hot lady friends. It's for doing nail stuff, but it works works very well. So I'm just going to hold it by hand. Usually it takes you no longer than 60 seconds to cure this. And I'll just hold it right over there. Now, I don't need to fully cure the whole thing right now, because we're going to do one more panel on the front. I just want it to not move around and drip as I apply the second piece here. Again, just use the toothpick to work it in. Make sure there's no air bubbles and no voids there. And kind of evaluate, do we need to add just a little bit, not even a full drop. So I'm going to put it right on the toothpick and then drop it into place that way, so we can really control the amount that we're adding. And maybe one more. Because I want this to be as flush with the surface as possible. That looks like it should do. That looks pretty good right there. All right, so after a minute of the UV light, we can peel the tape right off. Do it nice and slow. That'll minimize how much residue sticks to the underside. For the most part, you won't get too much. There'll be a little bit, but after what we're going to do is give another minute of UV to the bottom so that it fully cures on both sides. Now we have our first two pieces of glazing done, and they look pretty good. They're shiny, they are clear, so there's still a little residue from the back of the tape on there, and what we're going to do is at the end we'll take the Q-tip, put a little bit of alcohol on it, since these are now fully cured, and the alcohol doesn't affect it. We can use it to remove what little residue there is there, and now we can move on to do some of the more complex shapes on the side. These next two sections are a little bit more complicated because there's a little bit of a curve, but what we can do is just lay a thinner layer down, cure it, and then lay the next layer down, and it won't really give us that much of a problem. Just a little bit more complicated in cutting the masking, or rather the background, we'll say, the backing out of the tape, but the process is going to be exactly the same as what we just did for the flat panels. I did the flat ones first because they were the easiest to get done. So let's just start adding our layer of resin in there. Make sure it makes contact with all the corners. Just a tiny touch more. Maybe just one little bit more. Here's the initial cure, and it's got just a little bit of a concave look, so I might put just another little touch on there to help it out, and then I'll do the other side. So with some simple steps and just a little bit of know-how, it's pretty easy to replicate or create your windows, canopies, cockpit glazing. UV resin can do a lot of things for you in your projects. This one came out pretty good. Took me less than an hour to do all of this. So, what are your thoughts? Anybody like this method? Don't like this method? Like other methods better? Feel free to share in the comments what you think. Thanks for joining me. Hope you enjoyed it. Maybe learned something new. For all you guys out there in YouTube land doing your own, keep building them well. And I'll see you with another project again real soon.